Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ IAS English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand why is Assam's Uniform Civil Code in news currently. And the reason why we have picked up this topic for our today's discussion is because in less than 2 weeks since the National Democratic Alliance, they have formed a government again in Assam. Now this new government has presented a 154-page bill in the State Legislative Assembly of Assam. This bill wants to introduce a uniform civil code in the state of Assam after following the template formed by similar NDA governments as they introduced the same in the state of Uttarakhand and Gujarat. Now, naturally, when this bill was tabled in the State Legislative Assembly of Assam, the opposition criticized it. They criticized it on first ground that they said that when you were going to introduce this bill, why didn't you hold a wider consultations first? And it is expected that in this coming week only, this bill will come up for discussion and consideration in the floor of the House of Assam. Now, the notes which I will be using for our today's session, you can also download them by going to a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel as well. Okay, so let us start our today's video by understanding what is the logic behind bringing this bill. The logic directly can be traced to the supreme law of the land, that is the Constitution of India. If you look at Article 44 of the Indian Constitution, it says in verbatim, the state shall endeavor to secure the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. But you need to understand this Article 44 is mentioned in Part 4 of the Constitution, that is the directive principles of state policy. So as against the fundamental rights which are legally enforceable and mandatory on the state, DPSPs are not legally enforceable. The Constitution makers mentioned the directive principle of state policies as a prescription to the union government that based on the time and circumstances, they can introduce such provisions at their own discretion. So, anything, including the Article 44, which is mentioned in the DPSP of the Constitution, this can be implemented by the state at any given time. So this rests with the discretion of the state. So this is the logical basis based on which the Assam government has now tabled a uniform civil code in the floor of the house. Now what this uniform civil code actually deals with, let us understand this. Now according to the Assam government, this uniform civil code is a major legal reform which has been introduced in order to ensure equality, transparency and most importantly ensure gender justice. Now this brings a proposed legislation which will replace the entirety of religion-based personal laws. If you can remember, personal laws which deals with matters such as marriage, succession, divorce, adoption, etc. Those are called as personal laws, and presently these are regulated by respective religions. So a person belonging to one religion would have a separate set of personal laws as compared to person belonging to the second religion. And this has been undone by the Uniform Civil Code. And Uniform Civil Code wants to introduce a uniform legal structure which will be applicable to all the residents of Assam. But there is a caveat here. What is this caveat? This Uniform Civil Code which will be introduced in the Assam will specifically exempt the population of scheduled tribes living in the state, which according to census 2011 amounts to about 12.4% of the state's population. This exemption has been given to scheduled tribes in order to protect their constitutional safeguards and their customary practices, which we have understood earlier that these are different from the mainstream. Now, what this bill tries to seek, it tries to bring a uniform civil framework, a legal framework which will deal with civil matters like marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption as well as live-in relationships, and this will be applicable to people irrespective of their religion. So this has a uniform application. Although while advocating legal uniformity, this legislation also seeks to preserve cultural diversity. How it seeks to preserve cultural diversity? It will allow individuals to continue solemnize their marriage based on their own traditional customs as well as their religious practices. So what has been done here, we will understand when we discuss the key provisions here. So in this regard, let us start by understanding what are the important legal provisions that have been introduced through this bill. First provision deals with marriage. Now in this regard, this Assam's Uniform Civil Code says that there will be a compulsory monogamy that will be followed in the state of Assam. Monogamy means one man would have a legal married partner which is a woman. They can't be indulging in a polygamous relationship where a man cannot have more than one wives or a woman cannot have more than one husbands. It says that the legal marriage of age has been fixed. It is for man, it is 21 years, as well as for women, it is 18 years of age. And it also regulates how the marriage needs to be done. It says that neither party involved in a marriage should have a spouse who is living at the time of marriage, nor they should be a party of a marriage that has not been ended yet, either through divorce or through annulment, which is done by the law. So only those people who are not married or who were married before where their spouses have died or they have divorced, only they are allowed to marry. And which kind of marriage? Monogamous marriage, right? So this is how the marriage has been regulated here. In addition to that, to get married, the parties involved in the marriage should have to give their consent to the marriage without any force, coercion, deception or fraud. It also states that any party should not be within the degree of prohibited relationships. What are prohibited relationships? This law enumerates 37 such relationships as prohibited relationships, which include marriage when it happens between first cousins. So marriage between first cousins are not allowed in the state of Assam after this bill becomes an act. Similarly, as I told you, bigamy, polygamy, these are prohibited by Assam's Uniform Civil Code, and as a result, if you indulge in them, it will attract penalty. What kind of penalty? Imprisonment up to 7 years, because you are going to violate Section 82 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita of the year 2023. Now let us talk about how it regulates other aspects of marriage. Here, the Assam's Uniform Civil Code makes it mandatory for you to register your marriage compulsorily. In order to register your marriage, you have to submit a marriage memorandum before the sub-registrar within the 60 days of the religious ceremony. And if you fail to register your marriage within the stipulated time, it would invite penalty of up to 10,000 rupees. Right? Now let us try to understand how it exempts certain cultural practices. On one hand, it says that you have to compulsorily register your marriage, but it also recognizes the traditional practices which are followed in order to marry someone. For example, this bill safeguards religious and cultural practices by allowing marriages to be solemnized through existing cultural practices like Vedic Vivah, Ahom Chaklong, Saptavadi, Ashirwad, Nikah, Holy Union, Anand Karaj. So you need to understand all the religious and the respective religious ceremonies have been recognized as a rightful way to marry someone. Right? So in a way, it introduces a law based on modern concept of law. On the other hand, it balances it with cultural practices, that you are allowed to indulge in your cultural practices provided you don't violate the law. Right? Now let us try to understand how it handles matters of divorce and child custody. It says, or it imposes a uniform guidelines that people belonging to all religions should follow when they have to end their marriage. It says the ground to ending a marriage through divorce can be based on the fact that if your spouse indulges in cruelty, if you face desertion from your spouse, which means spouse run away, and with mutual consent also. It says that if any child is born out of this married relationship, and if you're trying to end that married relationship, and if that child is a minor below 5 years of age, so normally the custody of that child would go to a woman up till the time of their early childhood period. So it ensures that in the times of breaking apart of families due to divorce, the benefit or the welfare of the child is taken care of by passing their custody naturally to their mothers. Similarly, it also states that if you violate lawful divorce proceedings or if you illegally dissolve your marriage, then it would attract imprisonment up to 3 years along with monetary fines. It even states that if you compel a divorced individual to fulfill some unlawful conditions before marriage, like nikah halala is a practice which Muslims usually follow, that if you divorce your spouse, that spouse can remarry you only after following nikah halala. What is nikah halala? Where the spouse is expected to marry some other person, indulge in the consummation of that marriage, and then only she is allowed to remarry her first husband. So these kind of practices, according to the Assam's Uniform Civil Code, has been made unlawful, and therefore you can't force your spouse to indulge, or your former spouse to indulge in such practices. And if you do that, you'll face imprisonment up to 3 years and fine up to 1 lakh rupees. In addition to that, it says that the Uniform Civil Code, how it would handle matters relating to succession and inheritance. First of all, the most important part of this Uniform Civil Code is that it introduces a gender equal framework for inheritance. in case if a person dies without leaving a legal will, then the property of that person would pass on to the class 1 heirs, which would include spouse, children and parents irrespective of their genders. So in many cases when we have seen where primarily women are discriminated against when it comes to inheriting their father's or their mother's property, this will be dealt with through such provisions. Similarly, if a person dies with a will, which is called as a testamentary succession, then the adult of any sound mind would have the right to execute a written will and execute a witness will. So each and every person in Assam have the right to leave a will, but if they pass away due to unfortunate circumstances without leaving a will, then their property would be equally divided among class 1 heirs without discriminating against the gender of the class 1 heirs. Similarly, when it comes to regulation of live-in relationships, this matter has created a lot of controversy. You need to understand Indian society for the past few decades is changing, and so has emerged the concept of live-in relationship, where partners live together under one roof without indulging or without legally marrying each other. Right? So the common consensus is most of these uniform civil code would prohibit such live-in relationships, but this is a wrong misconception. Why? Because many live-in relationships today, like the live-in relationships in Assam, would continue to be regulated, not prohibited by such uniform civil code. This bill, it introduces regulations to govern how your live-in relationships would be regulated. For example, you'll be required to mandatorily register your live-in relationship within a span of 1 month. Now, what is the benefit of such mandatory registration? Why do two people living with consent with each other do need to register their live-in relationship with the state? Because it gives you certain benefits. What are these benefits? Let us understand this. First of all, if due to that live-in relationship a child is born, then that child would be recognized as a fully legitimate child and would be entitled to the inheritance coming from either of their parents. Similarly, if desertion happens in case of a live-in partner, they would have recourse in the eyes of law, that they would have legal right to seek financial maintenance through approaching the court. So these are the benefits that you get if you register your live-in relationships. Primarily, it prevents women from getting negatively impacted by such relationships in cases of cruelty or in cases of desertion. Now, in case if you fail to register a live-in relationship, it would naturally attract penalties in form of imprisonment as well as monetary fine. And if you conceal material facts or submit false information during registration of such live-in relationships, then also you're entitled to penalties. Right? So this is how it mandates for you to even register your live-in relationships, because naturally it comes with many benefits. In addition to that, it also introduces penal provisions which are aimed primarily at preventing exploitation of the partners, fraud or unlawful practices. How it imposes penalty, let us understand this. Now, in cases if you marry a child or if the marriage happens without the consent, then it would lead to imprisonment up to 2 years or fine or even both, because here you are violating the Prohibition of Child Marriages Act of the year 2006. Similarly, in case if you indulge in fraudulent marriage, which might happen through force, coercion or concealment, or it might even invite imprisonment up to 7 years along with monetary fines. Similarly, if the marriage happens within the prohibited relationships, which has been mentioned in the Uniform Civil Code itself, like relationships or marriage between cousins, it would attract imprisonment until or unless those relationships are protected under valid customs, right? Similarly, if you submit false documents during registration of your marriage, then also you are entitled for penalties. So this is how your private matters, your personal matters, like matters relating to marriage, succession, adoption, even relevant relationships now will be regulated by a religious neutral uniform civil code, which is not the case right now, as many of these personal relationships right now are governed by your respective religious matters. We have seen in most cases women are being discriminated against, and this does not impose gender equality in a country where Constitution itself through fundamental rights states that you shouldn't discriminate solely on the basis of gender. So this is how constitutional provisions are being fulfilled by introductions of Uniform Civil Code. But that doesn't mean that this Uniform Civil Code has not faced any kind of criticisms. First criticism that has been imposed was levied by the AIMIM MP, Mr. Asaduddin Owaisi. He stated that this kind of introduction of uniform civil code basically means that you're backdoor imposing Hindu laws on Muslims, because according to him, these principles which govern succession, inheritance and divorce, these have picked up based on Hindu religion, and Muslims in India and people from other religions except Hindus are forced to comply with these kind of laws. Similarly, Mr. Asaduddin Owaisi also stated that this uniform civil code is not at all uniform, because on one hand, you're exempting tribals. Why? Because tribals need constitutional protection. Similarly, according to him, many other religious communities, for that matter, every religious community, have the right to protect their own culture under Article 29. But in this regard, you are only exempting scheduled tribes and not other communities. So that is why the application of this uniform civil code is not at all uniform in nature. So these two are the primarily criticisms that has been levied on uniform civil code. But we have seen even during the formation or the writing of the constitution by our constituent assembly, most of the legal experts at that time were of the opinion that India going forward need a uniform civil code, because then only you would be able to ensure equality, gender equality in Indian society, right? Now, before we move forward, the topic that we have dealt with right now is an essential part of Indian polity. To understand Indian polity, including all the other subjects of UPSC, economy, history, geography, you can take admissions in resolution batches. In resolution batches, if you take admissions, you're going to get maximum discounts on all our courses if you apply the code ATS Live before making the payment. Please remember, a batch is starting from tomorrow itself, that is 27th of May. So do not forget to take this admission, because time right now is of very critical essence. Since we have about 11 to 12 months of time for next year's prelims, if you take admissions right now, you'll get an optimum amount of time for preparation. If you do it late, naturally the time would not be on your side. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Now, before we end up our today's discussion, there are two questions that I want to solve. First is very similar to the actual question that appeared in 2015, but I've modified that question to suit our today's understanding. To secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India is a provision made in which part of the Indian Constitution? First, try to solve this. Let me know in the comment section. And second is this question. Consider the following statements regarding DPSP. What do they try to implement? Do let me know the correct answers of both these questions in the comment section, and the ones who get it right would get a thumbs up from my side. And before ending our today's video, if you want to download the notes, you can go to a Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And do not forget to subscribe to it. If you have any troubles in locating the channel, this is the QR code you need to scan. Okay, so this is all from my side for today. Please have a very good night, and we will see each other again tomorrow.